And now here's a movie that's kinda like what might happen if David Cronenberg sustained a serious concussion in a violent car crash, miraculously survived, but instead of going to the hospital, decided to make a Studio Ghibli movie instead. OKJA comes to us courtesy of Joon-ho, who previously directed The Host, Mother, and Snowpiercer. So if you're assuming that it's a bizarre, absurdist fantasy mashing up about 11 different genres and styles, and rather than trying to make them coalesce into a coherent tone, takes fetishistic satisfaction in violently yanking the audience back and forth between various emotional reactions, often all within the same scene while driving home a socio-political message, with all the subtlety of a claw hammer to the tailbone, that means you've seen his other movies and you know what you're in for. This time around, the subject under consideration is industrial farming, animal cruelty, and for good measure, media, marketing, activism, culture, and the weird intersections of all three. Built around an appropriately Frankensteinian hodgepodge of a plot that starts out as a whimsical kids movie, morphs into a pitch-dark social satire, and ends like a horror movie. All of it in service of mischievous message-mongering that keeps asking, did you get it, before smacking you upside the head and going, wrong, stupid, now look over there. The premise here is that a multinational agribusiness conglomerate decides to get the public on board with its new genetically engineered super pig livestock via a publicity stunt that sends 26 of the individual piglets off to quaint rural farms all over the world, ostensibly to determine which old-fashioned method of husbandry works best for the new future of the human food supply. 10 years later, one such super pig reared in the mountains of rural Korea named OKJA has grown up into the lovable pet and more or less best friend of a young girl named Miha, so when the big bad corporation shows up to take OKJA back and, use her for what she was engineered for, Miha decides to follow her. And this is where all the dark satire comes into play, as her quest attracts the attention and finds herself being alternately wooed, pursued, harassed, aided, abused, and used, both by the publicity-minded corporation and by a group of bumbling, ideologically confused animal rights militants who mean well but are a little unclear as to what their mission actually is, what side they're on, and what they were supposed to be all about in the first place. It's actually a lot like those episodes of South Park where an unscrupulous person and/or organization and the overeager activists opposing them both turn out to be just as obnoxious and/or evil as the other, except this version is being imagined by an emotionally mature grown-up capable of empathy, so it comes down on the side of personal humanity and small moral victories rather than everybody sucks hipster nihilism. But even though Joon-ho and his film both display a very clear loathing for both cloying corporate cynicism and Occupy-style millennial activism, the point being made about the ugliness of the meat industry is so unmistakable that it doesn't even really need to take the audience on the equivalent of a walking tour of the super pig version of an industrial slaughterhouse killing floor, but then it does anyway because, hey, if you saw Snowpiercer, you knew he was gonna do that. But does it all work? Sort of. The main goal of making you sympathize with OKJA specifically, and also Mia's persistent, will you assholes please just let me take my goddamn pig home and fuck off ethos, carries through successfully all the way to the end and delivers a satisfying emotional climax that could have either been enormously depressing or cynically nihilistic, but instead plays out like a very potent distillation of do what good you can where you can. Getting to the point of that, though, is a little on the rough side. Unlike with Snowpiercer, the mashup of styles and tones don't really add up to a whole lot greater than the sum for me this time. I still enjoyed how messy and chaotic it all is because Joon-ho really is committed to this type of filmmaking and no one else is doing anything in the same vein these days, and there are individual moments of it that are near masterpieces, like the initial pretending it's a kids movie stuff with OKJA hanging out in the woods, and a cheeky needle drop for a 70s soft rock staple that's as well executed as any of the similar gags in Guardians of the Galaxy. On the other hand, having half the cast apparently instructed to go for broad caricatures in their performances tends to deflate the tension in scenes that seem to have been aiming for something darker. Tilda Swinton isn't bad, playing the evil corporate boss lady as what I'm assuming was yet to be another character originally conceived as a preemptive mockery of a then-presumed President Clinton, i.e. a ruthless female corporatist cynically grafting a quasi-progressive face onto the same old exploitative capitalist machinery. Wow, last year was so friggin' long ago. But on the other hand, Jake Gyllenhaal is just painful to watch as a kind of evil Steve Irwin. I'm not saying his human cartoon of a performance isn't a bold gamble that the film deserves credit for taking, but it doesn't work and has no discernible payoff. Sorry. On the other hand, hiring Paul Dano to essentially play a dark yet ultimately endearing parody of Paul Dano's general on-screen persona as the leader of the animal rights militants turns out to be a pretty winning idea. Dano may or may not be a limited instrument as a performer, but he is undisputedly the best person we have right now to play Paul Dano. An Seo-hyun makes a solid anchor for the film as Mia, but, well, that's kind of all she's asked to do, be the recognizable actual human in the middle of all this chaos and carnage. In the end, OKJA is a movie that I liked, while also completely recognizing that it doesn't really work. 2.5 stars, worth checking out.